Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Dojo Live. Today is Wednesday, May 5th, 2021. Cinco de Mayo. I just realized it's Cinco de Mayo. With the lockdowns, you have no clue what day it is, but it's Cinco de Mayo. Welcome to the show. I want to welcome my co-hosts, Kim Lantis in Hermosillo, Mexico, who's actually from the office today. How nice is that?
I had to
And-
escape.
yeah, I hear you. And then Carlos Ponce from Cuernavaca, Mexico. Hi, Carlos.
Pleasure to be here as ever, Julio.
And today we have Anne-Sophie Bloas,
No,
who is from San Francisco. She is the founder and CEO of Ravacan. And we're going to talk to her about Industry 4.0. 4.0. So if you're wondering what that is, stay tuned. It's only 25 to 30 minutes. We won't waste your time, we promise. Before we get started on the topic today, let's get to know Sophie a little bit. Sophie, please introduce yourself. Let us get to know you.
Hey, yes, thank you very much for having me. I'm Anne-Sophie. As you can already tell, I have an accent. I'm French, yeah, I started my career in Europe, in different countries actually, Spain, Germany. My whole career is about procurement and is industrial procurement actually. I started as a buyer in CPG company Reckitt, and then I moved to aeronautics when I was a buyer there as well, at Rolls-Royce in Germany. Then automotive cost reduction manager for Visteon. And then I decided to move to the US and ended up at Fitbit as a global commodity manager, looking after sourcing innovative materials. And so I got into entrepreneurship, and now I have a company, and that's my whole life. So I can talk about hobbies, but actually my hobby is essentially my company right now.
Awesome. Well, it's good to meet you. Thanks for joining us. Always exciting to see female entrepreneurs in tech. We need more of them, so thank you for that. Tell us a little bit about Ravacan. Did I say that right? Is it Ravacan or
Yeah.
Ravacan? Okay, cool. Tell us a little bit about the company, what gave birth to this idea. What do you guys do?
Yeah, so the company is essentially something that was in my head for a long time. I was, as I was describing, I was a buyer, a cost reduction manager, and I was always doing my cost models in Excel, organizing myself as a digital native, and most of the time the youngest buyer in the team. I was building those models for my teams, and at some point I moved to Silicon Valley, and I thought I would have an innovative software to use at Fitbit, and to see that I had to build over again my spreadsheet. I was thinking, okay, there is a better way. I have to do something about it. If nobody is doing it, I will do it. And actually, the story is that I learned programming. So I went back to school, studied programming for a year, and created a prototype of what I wanted to build, and managed to sell it in 5 months. So I was thinking, okay, now it's starting. Yeah.
Awesome. Hanging out in Silicon Valley will do that to you. When I lived in New York City, there's like this buzz where you got to keep moving. And then if you go hang out in Palo Alto near Stanford, you just kind of feel like, I got to go build something because everybody's building something, everybody's coding. So welcome to the bug, right? Let's go right into the topic. Kim, what are we talking about today? Let's dig in.
Sure, and thank you for being here, Anne-Sophie. Today's topic, as chosen by you, is Industry 4.0, the dawn of the new supply chain manager, how U.S. manufacturers can use sourcing and supplier collaborations to create winning strategies. So the first question today, Anne-Sophie, is why? Why did you choose this particular topic to talk about today?
So I chose it because actually I realized that a lot of people are not giving enough attention to industrial sourcing. I was explaining that we didn't have tools. Like, you have salespeople, they have CRM software. You have engineers, they have PLM software, product lifecycle management software. So you have all those departments that have their own tools. And my function, my job, where you only have Excel and email. And so why is that? And I think right now it's the time for sourcing and supply managers to really have to step up their game and to have powerful tools. And I'm going to detail what it means exactly. But in Industry 4.0, you have the revolution of IoT. So you're connecting your manufacturing line with, AI, like image recognition. And that is very important and interesting, because then we can, work on making sure that manufacturers in the US have as well, enough leverage to be very productive and efficient.
Such as like the machines that blow burnt potato chips out of the bag.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So you save a lot of money with those, technologies. And as well, there is a lot of things going on with logistics, like how do you track, goods around the globe, how you track where they are, how you solve critical problems related to duties and blockage on the Suez Canal. But beyond that, you have as well actually the strategy of where do you want to buy your goods and your components. What suppliers do you choose to work with? And this is something I want to talk about today.
So how is that done today, Anne-Sophie? Because I was lucky enough to work in some industrial design IoT houses back a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And in the supply chain, in the logistics space, I mean, it's really challenging even to put a LTE type device that will stay on for several weeks, especially when you're shipping something on a cargo ship. And then there's also the challenges of different cities in different parts of the world that don't have the same infrastructure. So right. Is that, this is going back probably 10 years now, in the early days of the IoT. Has that evolved now to the point where you can have visibility and infrastructure, and those partners, those suppliers that provide that capability, are they more valuable in the supply chain? Well, how's that evolving today?
So yeah, it depends on the commodity or the category of product, right? So you would have electronics components, and where you're sourcing is very important, because then you need to select the right partners. And you can see as well with the strategic choice of Apple to build their own chip, that here there is a strategic choice on how we want to select components. And then you have raw materials that follow the same patterns, and mechanical components, where for mechanical components you design, and the challenge is how do you design a component that is easy to manufacture, easy to source, and you can switch sources. This is the whole thing. And how it's done, actually, it's done with a lot of experts. So people that are specialized in buying certain type of products, and they have the knowledge, they have the network, and so it's still very manual. And they negotiate creating their own models with Excel spreadsheets and emails. Yeah.
Anne-Sophie, I have a question. Your platform, cloud, Ravacan, your cloud platform, you say that, well, it empowers manufacturers to get the unfiltered truth about their product costs, right?
Yeah.
So taking the unfiltered part, does this mean that there's some kind of filtered truth that might hinder the efforts of these companies and the success of these companies at some point?
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good question. The fact that when you send requests for quotations to your suppliers, you send them with, an email, and maybe you're going to add a cost breakdown template in an Excel, but then you will get an Excel back. And so it's very hard to consolidate everything and to keep track of the evolution of the different proposals. And how does a change in the cost breakdown of a component impact the overall product, right? So the end product you're making. So essentially what we are doing is to automate part of the interactions between the buyers, the suppliers, and the contract manufacturers, if they have some, especially in consumer electronics or CPG, for example. And then suppliers, they can manage their cost breakdown and share it with the buyers. And actually, when you have this first step, you have visibility over who's supplying your components. And then you have a second step, which are the supplier of your suppliers. And there it's very hard to get visibility, and especially when you have, legacy tools. So our platform is giving possibility as well to the buyers to visualize their supply chain and to get, more strategy in place beyond the first tier. Yeah.
Speaking of strategies, I know that particularly with this generation of workers and the upcoming generation, purposefulness and meaningfulness are much more important to us than perhaps generations prior.
Yeah.
Part of that being certifications, ethical, so I'm lost of words for here, but obtaining materials, raw materials, and otherwise in an ethical manner, etc. So would your product also help manage those type of components that might just not be number crunching, but other elements of decision making that might matter more to me?
Yeah. At this point, we don't necessarily focus on this. The first step for us is to give visibility, and then you take action. But you're really pointing a very important thing, is that Ravacan is focusing on manufacturers. So you might have software companies helping on the sourcing of indirect goods. So they are like office supplies or services, catering, and things like that. We focus on direct sourcing. That means that components and materials that go into manufacturing the end product that the company is selling. And so
the trees and the steel and
right. And so if you look at manufacturers, they spend on average 70% of their revenue with those purchased goods, so with suppliers. So that means that actually the core resource that you're bringing to your company and then you're delivering on is actually outside your company. And so this is critical for your business. It's critical if your business goal is to sell cheaper goods, because then you need to rely on, the manufacturers making cheap goods, or it's not to sell cheap goods, it's rather to innovate. But there as well, because you're not always, expert in designing all the components of your product, you need to rely on the expertise of your suppliers. And then so you're offloading some control to your suppliers, and then you can bump into some problems around, where my materials are really sourced. Is my labor 100% legal, or is my supplier subcontracting to some population that should not be employed?
It's interesting. I would assume today that's got to be quite a challenge for someone to do that manually, work with spreadsheets and then have some sort of control whenever there's a change that happens, and not having that transparency. It's all based on relationships. Does this kind of transparency and visibility, as well as collaboration that this enables, also improve the risk of things like fraud, and such? And what are the next sort of, as people adopt this, as companies adopt this, what are some of the things that out there are asking for? It's kind of like you solve a problem and then suddenly there's a slew of other problems that you would think, oh, I want to solve that too. So what are the next things that are coming up?
Yeah, that's yeah. I mean, in the culture of purchasing, you find those examples with millions of dollars that have been actually, taken away by employees because you didn't have the transparency or the processes in place. I have to say that now companies, they are more structured and they are more sensitive to that. So, but yeah, obviously this is something that would have more attention from buyers. What I like to say is essentially what we are creating is like an autopilot. So it's not replacing the work of buyers, but it's empowering them to get more precise data, and so they can focus on what is really important, right? And so where they can really use their expertise, not to do VLOOKUPs in Excel, but rather to focus on building relationships, strategize, on their supply chain, and delivering value to their organization.
Why do you suppose that this was a space that had been, let's say, ignored for so long? The idea of a supply chain manager, it makes perfect sense. You talked about, CRMs. I don't know how long they've been around, but I'm guessing decades.
Yeah.
So why did it take so long for this aha moment to sort of catch on and the need for a supply chain manager?
So supply chain managers, they have been around for a long time. The problem is that they didn't have really tools, right? I think the use of Excel is great because you can start from zero and stop pretty quickly. It's versatile as well. You build your own models, and the perspective of thinking, okay, actually sourcing is very complex. It's different from one company to the other. But giving my experience, working for very different industries, I can tell you that the patterns are the same. So maybe the vocabulary is not the same, but a lot of things are the same. And as well, it's just that, I would say industrial buyers are people that like the thrill of building things as well, but not necessarily have the competence to create software. And as well, a lot has been done on the indirect side, but the complexity of the direct side, the manufacturing, has slowed down the process. But I think now it's a good time to change that.
Yeah, that's a story we hear often on our show. Somebody who has no tech experience whatsoever, and like you, a lot of experience in a different industry, and says, you know what, this needs to exist. And like you, they finally are the one with the courage to do something about it. So congratulations.
Anne-Sophie, I'm thinking of your concept of Industry 4.0. So taking that as an example, as a reference, what would you say, especially to the viewers who might be watching, what would you label as Industry 3.0 or 2.0 or 1.0? So what is the difference, and why what are the logical steps or the evolution of this? Would you mind telling us a little bit about why you chose 4.0 as part of the topic?
Yeah, like 4.0 stands for the new revolution of the industry, right? So the different numbers before were the different revolution in manufacturing, where you had first the implementation of the manufacturing line with the Ford new system of production, and then the surge of the internet, and now it's IoT. So actually, Industry 4.0 is not really used in sourcing yet, and I think we should put sourcing and supply chain management into Industry 4.0. Yeah, because this is
that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about, a lot of companies, a lot of tech companies, they are very focused in the US market or English speaking markets, and they don't often face the same challenges manufacturers face, which are sourcing product worldwide. So there's multiple languages and cultural differences. How is the software or the platform facilitating that communication between different countries and languages?
in
Is
so
that the
many.
next wave, or is that already built in? How are you planning to handle that?
No, I mean, software for me is clearly the solution to the problem of having just Excel, which is asynchronous. So I don't know if you want me to detail why software is better than Excel, but I can tell you that when you have a global supply chain where you have so many different time zones and asynchronous actually collaboration, having one source of truth is the key. Having an update in an email that is sent as in a spreadsheet that is sent as an attachment to an email is very hard to keep focus on the last version of the data, what has been done and when. You don't have activity tracking. So here with Ravacan, you have one source of truth. Everybody's looking at the same version of the data, and you can see who has done or changed what anytime. And as well, you can automate, you can generate reports, you can speed up your work. You can let the software do some reminders or even some repetitive task. Yeah.
Excellent. So, how many customers are adopting this today? Where are you seeing which sectors are adopting this faster that you're noticing who are the early adopters? Let me ask that question that you're noticing.
So our product right now is industry agnostic. So it can serve a multitude of different industries. But let's say that consumer electronics and CPG, packaged goods, are the main two industries. And why I think consumer electronics is that they are right now innovators. They need to stay on top of the game, and they have competition, and so they have to make sure that 70% of their suppliers, 70% of their revenue is well spent with the right partners. And CPG, because those companies, usually bigger, global companies, they have been trying to optimize their supply chain for a long time, and they still are in need of powerful software, and so this is where we serve them as well, and we help them, taking the best out of software technologies. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Specific to Ravacan, what would you describe your company culture as? What is the company that you're looking to build? Who are the type of people that you want working with you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I tend to, have the same characteristic as industrial buyers. I really love industrial sourcing for the four reasons. So it's a job where you need to be analytical. So you need to lead with data, but you need to value relationships and build relationships, right? You need to be interested in other cultures and be willing to travel the world, and to strategize as well. And so essentially this is as well in our culture, where we value relationships. We put our customer first, and team member and team collaboration is very important. Well, we at the same time try to lead with data, so try to be very focused on what we want to accomplish and track how we get there with real data rather than opinions. Yeah.
Very nice.
Great.
So, go ahead, Carlos.
No, I was just going to say that I was going to encourage Anne-Sophie that because we're approaching the final segment of today's interview, maybe she has some words of wisdom for would-be entrepreneurs or people who are actually embarking into the tech entrepreneurial spirit. What sort of advice would you give them?
The first advice is surely to try, right? Because I know that it could be it could be hard to jump into this. And to be honest, when I was in Germany, I did a startup weekend, and that was mind blowing. Startup weekend, I don't know if you know, it's an initiative that started with Google, and so you team up with people, and for a weekend you bring an idea to life. So you have business people, designers, and software engineers, and you can build something within the weekend and pitch at the end. And this is a fantastic experience. So anybody can try it. There's no big commitment. I think we
refer to that as a hackathon, at least here. That's similar.
Yeah, and but it doesn't need to be a technological product, so it could be anything for participating. And so this is a really good experience, because then you can feel or have a sense if you like this energy, and if you could lead in that circumstance. And so I actually won a startup weekend prize, and I went back to my manager saying, well, I want to really create what we've built this weekend, and they allowed me to have one day to work on my project per week. So I was working 4 days a week, with 1 day plus the weekend to work on my project. But then I realized that it was, not enough to really get the thing going. So you have to jump 2 feet into the unknown, and that's what I would recommend.
So that was the birth of Ravacan.
No, that was another project long
Okay.
time ago. Yeah.
Very cool. Also, that
Oh,
I
no.
don't know who your previous employer was, but I think it's great that they were able to encourage that culture for you as well as for them.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that's true.
I can relate to that. That's how Dojo Live was born, right?
Similar,
Right, Kim?
yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay.
Cool. So
Anything?
I guess my final question for you, you brought this up, and I think it's something that's near and dear to our hearts here at Ancora or all around the globe, and that was this idea of cross-cultural communication. So you being a French woman, I believe living in the United States, having worked in, you mentioned Germany, I think you said Spain. What would you say, what kind of advice would you have for us, all of us living, but also specifically working in a global community cross-culturally? Is there anything, perhaps misunderstanding, conflict, or something that you've come across in a really great way to sort of easily adapt or maneuver in an environment like that? What would a piece of advice be?
Yeah, I think it's very important to recognize that people in front of you might not think the same way. And even the words might mean something different. A good example is that a concept for French people is an ID. And so when you say we are going to talk about the concept, then French people would think, okay, we are going to brainstorm. But Germans, a concept is really something very detailed, is like a report, right? And so when you say to Germans the same thing, they are going to come super prepared, and they're going to be frustrated that the French just show up with their ID, you know? And so my recommendation is just to be aware that you have in front of you someone that might not think the same way, and to be super transparent. And so this is why it requires to align and to just ask the question, what have you understood? Are we on the same page? This is what we are expecting. And
Yeah, I love that.
It's naive about that, but yeah.
That ability to pause for, even if it's just a moment, and think, could this be cultural? Like, are they really, an unprepared blabbering moron, or is this cultural?
Yeah, you're totally right. Yeah,
exactly.
Sometimes you end up with both, but but that's an interesting concept. Yeah, totally. French show up with a cup of coffee.
Do you mean an
ready
idea?
to go.
Or are you going to whip out a report for us?
So, what I'm hearing, Anne-Sophie, is if you sitting around doing your work and are frustrated by the lack of tools or technology or automation or just innovation to do your role to be more effective at it, go ahead and build it. I mean, that's essentially what you did, right? I mean, you aligned yourself with people who could help you, who can give you the support needed to take an idea into fruition, into actually creating a product.
and
So, that's loud and clear. If you're a practitioner of some sort and you're struggling with something, you get an idea, just go do it.
yeah.
There's never been a better time to go do it.
And in the context of sourcing as well, I think it's time for sourcing managers and supply managers to go to the next level and to actually go into relationships with their suppliers that are at the next level. What I mean by that is in the 70s or 80s, it was very common to just squeeze the suppliers to get money out, it's just cost reduction. But now in the new environment where we actually need to pick the right partners to innovate, we need to actually bring on more analysis of the product, the design to manufacture, how I design my product so it's cost efficient and innovative. And for that, you need tools to be able to go deep into the cost and the supply chain strategies. Yeah.
Cool. So we have an audience question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to a supply chain that does not use software?
To use our
of course, to use hers.
Take a lot of medication.
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy, of course, to jump into a new software, but we are, I believe, the new generation of sourcing software, and so I invite everybody to connect with me on LinkedIn, and we can have a look on how we can help you. But for sure, I mean, we can create a proof of value and a business case to help manufacturers reach their goals. And a pilot is going to have a lot of difficulties, going across the Atlantic without autopilot. So I know it's exciting to jump into spreadsheets and try to figure things out, but I believe that sourcing managers, they need to focus on something else than crunching data, and rather on strategize and making sure that their hardware company is surviving, because it's not easy to generate profits out of hardware, and so you need to put everything you can on your side. Yeah.
Well, it's been a pleasure to have you as our guest. I really liked what you said about the importance of relationships as well. And the truth is, the more strategic companies, the more successful companies knew that years ago as well. They didn't squeeze their vendors like, or, penny pinch them all the way. They actually established those strategic relationships. And today, you just have to do it, or you're going to be out of business. So it's been great to have you. We wish you a lot of success.
Thank
We'll have
you.
to check in with you later to see if you have some additional use cases for us to share with us. Just stay with us as we go off the air in a minute. What do we got coming up? We have one more show tomorrow, right, Carlos?
One more, yeah,
All right, cool.
one more show, Tulio. And in case you're wondering how to fuse security and compliance in the cloud native pipeline, that's exactly what we're going to be talking tomorrow about with our guest, Mayor Goldberg, the founder and CEO of A Policy. That's the name of the company, A Policy. And the topic is going to be security and compliance automation for DevOps and Dev Security Ops. That's what we have tomorrow right here on Dojo Live at 12 p.m. Pacific. See you there and then.
Be well,
Bye.
everyone.